Hi, I'm Missy. I'm your friendly human design coach, and I'm excited to have you here today so that way we can really dive into those things that are holding you back from knowing who you are as a person. Those things that kind of make you always go like, oh, I feel like if I just had this one more thing, if I just was able to communicate a little bit better, if I was just able to connect with people a little bit better, if I just knew what my direction was. When we have those feelings that like something's missing, it can make it very difficult for us to step into our own power and self-worth. And I've noticed as I've worked over the years with clients that this is a constant challenge that people have. So you can be the most confident person outwardly, but inside you can still be doubting yourself and wondering. And so today's workshop is really set up to dive into the specifics of that identity center and break it down. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, but I do want to encourage you that if you have any questions either during this recording or afterwards, you can absolutely reach out to me. You can reach me on Instagram at I'm a Missy. That's IM_A_Missy, or on my personal Facebook at Missy_Wanstall_1. Wanstall is Wanstall. I'd love to hear what you find most interesting out of this workshop, or if you have any other questions, follow-ups, or any other ideas that you'd like to hear about how human design can really be practical for you. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We'll go through our presentation, really focusing on how we're filling in those missing pieces, right, of who you are and using human design as a practical way to do that. And because we're looking at who we are as a person, the identity center is going to be the area that we're focusing on. Now, if you don't have any background in human design, that's perfectly fine. We're going to hit the important pieces for you today. So you know that this is the right place for you if you have a there we go. You know this is the right place for you if you have a strong desire to really know who you are, but you're constantly struggling, like you feel like your identity is changing. So maybe one day you know exactly where you're going and you know what makes you passionate and you're excited and you're moving forward. And then the next day you wake up and you're like, I just feel off today. I don't really know what to do. Or, my mom wants me to do this thing, and my husband wants me to do this thing, and my boss wants me to do this thing. And you start to doubt and question who exactly you are as a person, and what what your skill sets really look like. So we know that as we learn our identity more, that just starts to go away. So this workshop today is also for you if you're just sick of doubting yourself, and as you're working through this process, you're like, look, I am just ready to find a way to actually figure out what's missing. And I really want to just consistently feel complete and worthy, right? Enough is enough. So as we work through these challenges, by the end of this session, you're going to understand why that missing thing isn't really missing. We're going to learn how to embrace the things that are your strengths that might feel like they're the things that are actually causing some challenges for you. We're going to have the clarity over why you feel like there's certain people or things that you need in your life to feel complete, and learn how to let them go. And through that process, we're going to learn some tactics to really define and step into the consistencies of your identity. So with that in mind, type in the chat for me. Does 1, 2, or 3 excite you the most? And it can be more than one. That's the case. Absolutely. Okay, so it looks like number 2 is the big winner there. Really looking at, I got these people, right? Yeah, my mom, exactly. I want to know why these certain people trigger me. I want to know why I feel like I need to have that significant other in order to feel like I'm complete. And as we go through this training, that's just really not the case. So to open this up fully and to really get you prepared for how to open this up, share with me. When you hear this question, who am I? How does it make you feel? And that's a little bit of a scary question. Like, what comes up? Do you have answers? Okay. Are you feeling doubt? Is your body responding in a certain way? Like, did you get a feeling of excitement that kind of ran through your body? Did you feel shame? Like, oh, I don't know the answer to that. Who am I? Why am I even here? I don't know what's going on. Did you get frustration? Like, I don't know, Missy, this is why I showed up today, because I've been asking myself this question for a while and I have no freaking clue what's on. Like, can you give me the answer? That's what I'm looking for. So whatever those answers are, and I'm seeing a whole bunch of similar things coming into the chat here, right? Exactly. So we're looking at the confidence, right? So confidence is something that you want to be, you want to have that. Right now, you're kind of not sure what that is. It's fuzzy. You're like, well, I don't know. Some days I'm a mom, some days I'm a employee. Sometimes I'm showing up for myself and I'm going to yoga. So when you look at these different pieces, notice that all those things I just said were not actually anything about you as a person. They were about things you do. And so when we dive into this and we look at some of these different strengths today, we really want to look at how you're defining yourself. And that's going to also lead to some of that consistency in what's happening, because there are going to be some days that we are better able to show up in certain roles than others. But who we are ultimately as a person is a consistent thing in us. And so when we learn to identify what our strengths are and embrace those strengths and how we express them, that's really what's going to allow us to consistently say who we are and to define us. So the reason that I am really designed quite literally in order to present this training to you today is that based on my human design chart, and that's the picture that I have on the right there. If you don't have your human design chart, you don't need it for today's workshop, but you will probably be curious about it at some point and want to take a look at it afterwards. You can go to mybodygraph.com and get a free copy of your birth chart. So definitely you'll want to take a look at that afterwards, but you don't need it right this second. So when you're going through and you're looking at these charts, what the charts do is they're literally visual representations of the energies running through your body. And that could mean where your consistencies are. So anything that's colored in, don't worry about what the color is. If it's not white, right? If it's colored in, that means it's a consistent energy that you can tap into all the time. If it is white, that means it's something that changes. And it changes because it's something that is going to pull in from the outside world and amplify that back out. So if you have a lot of white spaces, one of the big reasons you probably feel those inconsistencies is because, well, every time you're around a different person, or as the environment is changing, or the time of the year is changing, those things are going to trigger different things to be activated in your chart. So you'll have access to different energies, but it's temporary. So when we learn about human design and we really learn about what those consistencies are, we're able to lean deeper into them and then also not be concerned by those white spaces that are changing. We can use them as learning opportunities. We can say these white spaces are areas for me to develop further, right? They're areas for me to get new experiences that I don't normally have and embrace them and even amplify what other people are doing because I can bring a new sense of experience. So there is no good or bad in any of human design. A lot of people will look at their charts and I have a fairly defined chart. And so people sometimes look at mine and look at theirs and why is my chart so white? I don't have any energy. I don't have any strength. That's not true. You're totally fine. It's all about just knowing where your base is and then leaning into that base, because there are strengths in both the defined and the undefined areas of your chart. So in my chart in particular, I am actually designed to be a mirror for others to unleash their awesomeness. So I have an activity that I go through and identify your life's purpose and your mission statement. And in that activity, this is my answer. This is what I am here to do. I am literally here to show up so other people can figure out how amazing they are. And I've really honed in to do that by focusing on how human design applies in your daily life. So in this particular workshop, we're looking at who are you as a person? Well, you're with you every single day. And the way that you show up as yourself, the more you're able to step into your true power and your true design, the easier the flow of your daily life is going to be, and the overall happier you're going to be as well. So let's dive into some examples of charts and what they mean. So I've already briefly talked about those white spaces there. And this is a different person's chart that's up. And I want to point out that in the middle of this chart, there's a diamond that is white. And that means it is an open center. So each of the shapes in a human design chart represent a different type of energy. And they're closely aligned with the chakra system as well. So that diamond in the middle is the identity center in the picture. It's also known as the G center. So if you're familiar with human design, that's just another term for the same area. That identity center in the middle, if it's open or white, that means it's essentially looking for completeness. It's constantly trying to fill in that extra space. And when we have that open identity center, whenever we're around other people, particularly when they have defined identity centers, we're going to attract in who they are as a person. And we're going to reflect back who they are as well. So in doing so, we oftentimes, people who have the open identity centers can sometimes have trouble knowing who they are as a person because they're constantly amplifying everybody else around them. But that doesn't mean that these are bad things, right? When you have this open identity center, because you do have that ability to amplify, it's going to give you a different kind of superpower. So again, this session is really going to focus on that diamond in the middle, because that diamond is really all about representing who you are. And you'll notice there are different numbers coming off of each of those different spaces on the diamond. Each of those numbers is a gate in the human design system. The gates are directly connected to the hexagram. So if you've ever familiarized yourself with the I Ching or heard of it, the hexagram system is where these numbers are actually coming from. And that's why they look a little bit out of order. Human design has done a really nice job of bringing together multiple concepts. It's brought in the chakras, it's brought in astrology, it's brought in the Kabbalah, it's brought in I Ching, it's even brought in points of physics and points of the physical body as well, all together into one integrated system. And as part of creating this picture, the numbers look a little bit out of order, but that's just because of how they relate to the grand scheme of the hexagram system, which is a 1 to 64 numbering. So this is just the kind of body visualization of how to start making those connections. So every single one of the numbers or the gates in this picture are a specific strength. And when we look at these, so you'll notice that in this person's chart, and this is a friend of mine, she's got a lot of openness, a lot of white spaces. So not only is her identity center itself open, meaning it's constantly looking for ways to attract those other people into it, but also all of the lines coming off of it are all white as well. So she's attracting tons and tons of strengths into her life. And I just want to really stress in this because, like, initially somebody who would look at this kind of freaks out and they're like, oh my God, like, if I don't have any sort of definition, who am I? Like, that does that mean like I'm not my own person? Like, what does that really mean? And that's not what that means. It just means that you change frequently. You're going to transition as you're around other people. You're going to pull in their energies and amplify it back. And that also just means that the way that you express yourself is also going to change. You know, your sense of self and identity and worth and the way that you give and receive love, those processes are going to be much more fluid than someone who has a colored in identity center. Doesn't mean it's any better or worse, but if you have that sense of missing feeling, it's likely that you are open here or conditioned. So if you look at your human design chart and you are filled in here and you still feel like, oh yeah, something's always missing, there's another concept called conditioning, which essentially means that things are out of alignment, the energy is not flowing through it. So as we go through this workshop today, again, my main focus is going to be on the people who are open to begin with, because that is a key sense of feeling like something's missing. But if you are colored in any of these areas and you're like, hey, no, that still sounds like me, that doesn't quite sound right, that's just an opportunity for you to learn how to clear out some conditioning. And that's something that I work through with my one-on-one clients. So let's dive a little bit deeper. So this is our overall center. So we can also have, as I mentioned, some definition differences in our gates, those little numbers. And there are 4 different types of ways that the gates could be set up. So first of all, you have a hanging gate. A hanging gate is an example of something where you have one side of it colored in on your chart, doesn't matter whether it's red or black, and not the other side. So in this case, I have the 7 to 31 line in my chart. And so I have the 7, but I don't have the 31. And so my energy is literally constantly seeking that 31 energy. And we're going to go through each of these identity center strengths as part of today. So that way, you know, this is what I have. And this is what feels like it's missing, but it's really not. But now I have a reason to understand why it feels like something is missing. The next one that you might see come up is your open channel. So you'll notice that I have one on the right there that's completely white. I don't have either side of it. And when you have an open channel, essentially, you're going to be attracting energy into that, but it usually doesn't change how you interact with the world. It's more like when you're around people who have those energies, you go, oh, you're really cool. That's a great superpower. Good for you. but they don't necessarily reflect back into the way that you interact with your own body and your own self. You'll also see that there might be lines where you have both sides. So I have a 1057 line. So if I have, and again, red and black doesn't matter, it's just if it's colored in or not. So if you have a complete connection, that's now known as a channel. And those channels are going to represent essentially superpowers. So like when you have one side and the other side, like when your powers combine, it suddenly becomes a new power altogether. And so those channels, those are things that are consistent in you all the time. When other people are coming in and around you, it's not going to change your ability to tap into that power. So that's something that we're not going to talk about today, but is really good, especially when you're thinking about what your strengths are, and what your life purpose is, what your mission is, like the things that you are really designed to do all the time. Your channels are a great place to look for suggestions there. And then for the next one, we have our open gate with a defined partner. So this is really just a different way of looking at a hanging gate, but I bring it up because in today's workshop, we are focusing on the identity center. So if you look at the bottom, you'll notice that I do not have the gate 2, which is coming out of that identity center, but I do have the gate 14. Really, that's just saying that my gate 14 is a hanging gate, but my gate 2 is not. So in that case, I don't really have a need from my identity center to reach out to that additional energy in my sacral, which is my consistent energy piece. However, my sacral, which is where that gate 14 is coming out of, that is reaching towards my identity center. And so I'm essentially seeking ways to apply my energy, my consistent energy that's coming up, in order to express who I am as a person. So there is a level of still like need and missing feeling in there. However, that's not going to be the focus of today because that's coming from the sacral instead of coming from the identity. So again, today's focus is going to be all of the gates where if you have a partial energy like an A partial energy coming from, and actually let me zoom in on that. So if you have a partial energy coming from one of the gates out of that diamond in the middle, whether your diamond is colored in or not, the concept of this hanging gate is still going to apply for you. And if it's missing the other side, again, whether it's red or black, doesn't matter. Also, sometimes when people look at this picture, like if you look at this, you're like, oh, so it's like 75% filled in. No, that's you don't have to worry about that. It's either from one side or not. So it just sometimes is the visual representation. Some lines are longer than others. So this just means that I have like the 7 activation. I do not have the 31 activation. Again, you don't have to worry about the sizing. You don't need to worry about the red or the black for this particular workshop. So the way that we really use these hanging gates in order to get better is that the hanging gates are like seeking the opposite side. So when I have one energy, it wants the matching energy. And it feels like something's not there if that matching energy doesn't exist. And oftentimes, therefore, we look for those energies in other people. And when we don't find those people, we're craving them. And when we do find those people, we tend to get unhealthily attached based on some of these reasons. So if you have somebody in your life who has the counterpart to a lot of your hanging gates, they're going to feel really powerful to you. You're going to really want them in your life. And even if it's an unhealthy relationship, it could be difficult to break those connections. So as part of this workshop, by starting to identify what your strengths are, so leaning into the things that are truly yours, that you can own every day and really step into, recognizing that when you're around those other people and they make those connections for you. So again, if I had somebody who had, say, the 31 side, that's going to do a temporary supercharge. That's going to allow me to access these extra powers that I don't really normally have and make me feel really excited. And so by identifying them, in my case, like what that 31 is, that lets me say, okay, that's what I feel like is missing. But it's not really missing. It just means that when they're there, I have this extra ability to supercharge. So to give you an example of this and how like this scenario, it really doesn't make you a lesser person when you're not with that person who's filling in the gap. So like think about a race car. And if you've ever like seen a drag race or something, they'll sometimes mention that they use nitrous and that gives them a speed boost when they're going through. So if I'm in like this really great race car and I'm driving along and then I hit the nitrous, I get this really fast speed boost, puts me ahead of everybody, and then the nitrous runs out and I slow back down. that did not change the quality of the race car I was driving. It just gave me a temporary boost. And that's really what's happening when we connect with the people who complete our hanging gates. I'm still me. I still have my base strength. And it was just enhanced temporarily while they were with me. And so when those people leave our lives, or we think about needing to leave them, it can be a very scary situation because we feel like we're losing a piece of ourselves. And really all we're doing is we're removing that piece that was meant to be temporary anyway, and allowing us to lean back into the strengths. And by recognizing those strengths more, it allows us to feel confident in who we are as a person without that additional person attached to us still. So this can also work the other way too. I know I just explained that in terms of kind of unhealthy relationships. In healthy relationships, knowing who is completing you and how they're completing you, that can also help you respect them more for those areas. That can help you thank them and have gratitude for those areas that they complete. You're able to also recognize that you're likely completing them as well, and you're able to lean your strengths even more into the relationship. So whether it's whatever the relationship is, starting with a sense of awareness of what your natural energies are and what your energies are trying to get more of, that's going to help you gain control over how exactly you perceive your relationship with others. So what we're going to do now is go through each of these gates that are attached to the identity center. And for each gate, we're going to talk about the strength. So I do want you to really note down, now, how does the strength show up in your life now? How can it show up even more in your life? And I do want to point out that as I go through all of these examples, I'm going to be describing these strengths from a healthy state. So if for whatever reason I go through a strength and you go, yeah, I have that defined in my chart. I've gone to mybodyraf.com and I've looked at it, and that number's got color on it for me. So that's going to be defined. When that happens and it doesn't resonate in the explanation, that usually means that you have a blocker. There's some sort of conditioning that has happened to you where you are not expressing that strength in the way that you are made to be. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. It could be that you're not following your strategy or your authority. I know those are terms that you might not be familiar with. It could be that, again, you've been societally conditioned in some way. So if any of these don't resonate with you, I encourage you to reach out to me. That's certainly a conversation we can have. And that's also something that I do work through with my coaching clients in depth to really identify where those blockers are, so that way we can free them and they can step into their strengths. Because knowing your strength is the first key, but then being able to step into it requires you to clear out those energies that might be getting in the way of actually fully using those energies. So again, as part of today, I'm going to be talking about these energies as if they're already clear. And if you notice a disconnect, just take a note about it and reach out to me either on Instagram at I'm a Missy or Facebook at missy.wanstall.1 after the session. So with these different pieces, we have our hanging gates. And then also as we go through it, I want you to take note of what are you seeking? How have you found those things that have been missing in your life? Do you feel like they're still missing? And as you start to define those things that are missing and how they show up, when do you get triggered? Is there a situation or a person who triggers you because they have a certain set of characteristics? And so as I start to go through these, sometimes just recognizing what that trigger is enough to remove it completely. So if you have somebody who, for example, talks over you all the time and that bothers you, just by recognizing that they have an energy that makes them want to share things all the time can be enough to at least define that trigger and either be okay with it or open a conversation in a more logical way about what's happening and how to address it. So let's take a look at our first set here, our 1-8 gate. So the 1 is in the identity center and the 8 is in the center that is above the identity, that is our throat center. And so again, as we go through this, I want you to think, okay, well, how does gate 1 show up in your life? Gate 1 is about creative self-expression to change the world. And that might sound really big and grand, but is this something where maybe you've thought about creating a magazine for a youth group that you're working with? Or maybe you've thought about developing an app in order to share meditations with people. Or maybe you've thought about going to your child's school and putting on a play in order, or helping support a play, so that way the children really have the opportunity to express themselves on the stage. I mean, there's lots of different ways that this could show up, and whether you've acted on it or not isn't the point of this gate. It's really about looking for those opportunities of that creative self-expression. And ideally, as you learn more about your human design, you're able to step into and actually take action on that creative self-expression. And again, if you have this gate 1, if it has a colored line coming from it, and that doesn't sound like you, that means that there's likely some conditioning there that you'll need to work through. Now, for the people who have this gate defined and do not have gate 8 defined, so gate 8 is the one it would be connected to on the throat side, if that's white, then the gate 8, which is the role model, right? It's the role model really trying to make a difference. This person also needs recognition in order to do it. So you can start thinking, okay, well, this is an energy that I'm like trying to attract into my life. So who is this, right? What kinds of situations, what kind of people are triggering this? So maybe, for example, there's someone who's in your life who is constantly trying to help and like, okay, oh, you have this great idea to make this app for meditation and share it with the world. I can help you with that. Or I can put you in contact with people who can help you put an app together, but you weren't necessarily ready to get that help yet. So that person with the gate 8 needs that recognition before they step into actually helping. And in the meantime, they need to be that role model style. So looking for those situations where you're like, okay, it is helpful for me to find somebody who's already making a contribution and already making a difference the way that I want to be. But that does not diminish the fact that you are still bringing the creative self-expression to the table. And when they come together, they're going to make something beautiful. But individually, each person also has something beautiful within it. So again, for each of these as we go through, you're going to be thinking, how does this show up? The piece that's colored in on your chart. And who or when are these situations triggered? Like, when does this behavior trigger me? And that's a sign that you are trying to get that opposite side. Your energy is trying to pull that in, and that's the stuff that you feel like's missing. So when you recognize those things that you feel like are missing, you want to think for a moment and go, okay, well, if it's missing, that's not really missing. It's just I don't have it innately in my energy. So what do I have on my own consistently? How can I step into this creative self-expression further? And then also, how can I attract those people who are the role models, who are making a difference, and have them support me rather than become part of me? Rather than replacing my identity, they are making my identity stronger. Those are the kinds of questions we want to be asking as we go through each of these. So let's look at the next set. So our gate 7 is about natural leadership and recognition. So these are the people who oftentimes are sought out. They don't necessarily apply for that leadership role, but they're like, hey, you're really good at this. Would you run the committee? Those are the gate 7 people. Step into those leadership abilities when you're called out for them. Now, the people who have this gate 7 are seeking that gate 31. And you'll notice at the top of each of these slides, I have the names of the gates. So in this case, gate 7 is known as self-interaction. Gate 31 is known as democracy. If you do research on human design, you will find slightly different names for each of these gates. And so when I've written out the descriptions here, these are essentially summary descriptions of key behaviors that you would notice in people who have these gates when they are not conditioned. So in gate 31, you're looking for basically these servers of the people, right? You're almost, even though you have this natural leadership ability, you almost want either a mentor or someone who is able to just be very service oriented and show you how to bring your leadership maybe to service. And that doesn't mean that you don't have that leadership ability when they're not around. What it does mean is that when you do connect with these people, you're able to take it a step further and go even deeper and help serve the greater community. And it also is a more ongoing kind of sense of leadership when you're with the gate 31 people, whereas with the 7, it might be for a shorter project. Again, it might be something that you've just been asked to do, and it's not necessarily something that you're going to do for forever. The next one that we have is your gate 13 coming out of your identity. So if you have this one colored in, and you'll notice in the middle, I always have a picture of exactly where in your identity center we're looking at, so that way you know which things we need lit up. So if you have that gate 13 lit up, but not the gate 33, which is still going to be connected to the throat center, this means that you're a really great storyteller and story keeper. And how is this showing up in your life? Do people just tell you things all the time? Do you have this plethora of really personal pieces of information that people just seem to share with you? And is it very easy for you to give advice based on these stories and have it received well? If so, that's a likely sign that you are doing well with your gate 13 energy. Oftentimes then, when we're seeking that gate 33, so if we don't have that, well, we've listened to these stories and now we're just holding on to them. So whereas in the gate 13, we're almost sharing it right back to that person with what the advice is, gate 33 is using those stories for another purpose. Maybe it's to you share with a friend. It might not necessarily be mentioning specific names. There's certainly a level of privacy associated with gate 33. But gate 33 takes the energies of these stories and shares them when it's appropriate, and shares them when it's safe to really make the people better and support the people who the story was from, as well as whoever they're sharing with. So when we have the gate 13, we're giving these stories, we're listening to these stories, and we're seeking for when exactly we should be sharing them. So instead of having it just on back to the individual person who was talking to us in the first place, it's now going to that higher level. And so we might feel a little isolated in how we're responding to these stories if we have 13 and not the 33. And so that 33 kind of gives us this extra sense of safety and security of the sharing and doing something and acting on those stories. Again, if you don't have the 33 around you, you still have this strength to tell the stories, to listen to the stories, and to give that advice. Again, as we go through each of these, be thinking, how does this show up in my life? And please feel free to pause this as we're going through. If you're looking at your body chart and you're saying, okay, wait, which ones do I have? What's going on? And if you have a line, the things on the left should be resonating with you. If they're not resonating, that means there's some deconditioning that needs to be done and that you're not stepping into your true power. And if you feel like that thing on the right is missing, that's exactly what this workshop is designed to point out for you. So recognizing what those missing things are, where you're seeing these, like when you're with certain people who have these activities or have these strengths in them, are they triggering you because you're annoyed or jealous of these strengths? Or are they triggering you in a way where it's oh, okay, I feel like I have these extra powers and I can do it. And when they go away, what happens? Are you able to sink back into yourself and be you again and be satisfied with that? Or do you feel like something's not there? And ideally, you're aiming for that satisfaction, because when they go away, that doesn't change the power of you. Let's take a look at the next one. So this gate 10 is extremely powerful because it has the potential to be connected to up to 3 different gates. So we're going to go through this one actually 3 times because there are different connections that can happen. So the 1, the 7, and the 13 that we went through already, those were connected to the throat. The gate 20 is also in the throat. So it's about your communication that you have here. So gate 10 is empowering others by living as yourself. You're taking personal responsibility and you're avoiding blame. So by being you and by showing up as you and saying, yes, this is my responsibility, and for better or for worse, this is what happened, that's going to empower other people. So gate 20 is about living in integrity and making changes. You're essentially switching from an awareness to action. So somebody who's very strong in integrity is going to recognize something that needs to be done, like just what the right thing is to do. And then because this is coming out of the throat center, they're going to be able to speak into existence whatever change needs to happen, whether they do the change themselves or whether they support it, promote it, write an article about it, recommend you start some sort of like social activism with it, whatever it might be. When we look at these different pieces, so in this person with the 10, if they're seeking that gate 20, they're looking for this direction for action. They're looking for, how can I really live up to my true values? And so when activated by this gate 20 person, they feel really great. They're like, okay, not only am I empowering others by stepping into my senses, but I also am doing it in a way that's consistently right. And so when that gate 20 goes away, that gate 10 can start to doubt themselves. They can go, okay, well, I feel like I'm taking personal responsibility, but I don't know if I'm taking responsibility for the right things. And so that doesn't mean that you still can't empower other people by taking the responsibility for your things, whether they were right or wrong or neutral, depending on the perception. It's still just that level of personal responsibility is still going to empower others. That gate 10 is also connected to gate 34, and gate 34 is in our sacral center, which is our consistent energy. The manifesting generators and generators are going to have this sacral center that's going to lit up, not necessarily gate 34, but this is something where that sacral is the consistent everyday energy. It's like the powerhouse that happens. And so the people with this gate 34, these are multitaskers. These are people who are go, 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 go. Sometimes they go so fast and so long that it's difficult for them to slow down. So they have the energy to go really fast when they're doing things that are aligned with their other energies. And so somebody who has a gate 10, who's seeking a gate 34, they're going to be in a situation where they're like, okay, I'm doing all my things. I feel like there's more that I can do, right? When you're triggered by this gate 34 person, suddenly you're going to either want to do a lot more things than you normally do, or you're going to be able to do a lot more things than you normally do, depending on some of the other energies that you have. And in either case, it doesn't mean that you have to take on that additional task doing. And just by going back to, okay, what are the things that I'm responsible for? What are the powers that I can step into to show up as me? That's going to keep you from blaming that other person. That's going to keep you from taking on more than you can necessarily handle and allow you to align with that rightness. But you're going to have a sense of urgency and speed when you're associated with these people who have the 34 energy. And if we continue with this gate 10, so now we look at the gate 57. And 57 is associated with spleen, which is your fears, your instincts. And so this gate 57 person, because the instincts, they are very much trusting intuition over logic, and they live in the present. They see what's happening right now and what does this mean. And the gate 57 people can also frequently doubt themselves, especially if they are conditioned in some way, because their intuition's a tricky thing, right? Intuition is something where their intuition is right, but they have to learn to trust it. And so the connection, the 57 person can actually take a lot from the gate 10 person. So this is something where if you combine with somebody and you have a new superpower, you can actually give a lot of learning to the partner in this case and help them to step into their intuition. By, again, living in your own power and your own design, you're able to then empower this other person to trust themselves. So it's a nice symbiotic relationship. And so as we're going through each of these, and you're recognizing what are my strengths, how do they exist already, how do they change, or what happens when I interact with somebody who has this connecting energy? Does it add to my energy? Does it make me not like them? Does it make me concerned? Like what's the piece? Is it neutral? Is it just like, hey, these other people have their own thing going on and this is where I am and this is where they are and awesome, we're going to work together. It really just starts with an awareness of where is this energy coming from? Is it coming from myself? Is it coming from someone else? And when the energy is coming from someone else, you can tap into and use that energy in order to heighten your own structures and activations. You just can't make it yours, because if you make it yours and you become attached to it, then it's going to make it feel like there's that sense of lack again when it disappears, because it's temporary. Okay? You will always have your strengths. You will always have your definitions. And so when I teach human design, I really focus on, let's make sure you're doing and you're showing up really well as yourself first. And then we can bring in those interactions with the other people and understand how those interactions with others are affecting you. And so we have just a few more here. We're going to work down the bottom. So when we go into our gate 15, we're now moving into connections to the sacral. That's, again, our energy center. So the sacral, our gate 15, it's a really like go big or go home kind of energy. And this is something that harnesses a lot of rhythms that are changing. So the gate 15 is like constantly trying to find this like sense of balance, but because they go to extremes all the time, that balance is really difficult. So there's a lot of movement going on in the activity levels and the ease of somebody who has a gate 15 activated. And they are, again, really pushing their boundaries on a regular basis. They're going to be seeking that gate 34, which we've talked about already, that multitasking, fast-paced kind of energy. So if we have somebody who has the gate 15 that's seeking the gate 34, that gate 15 person is ultimately going to say, well, what does, what are those like really big things that I can get done really fast? Like, how quickly can we get this proposal off the ground? How quickly can we get this park built? How quickly can we get this business proposal through? Whatever it is, how quickly can I get my house moved, right? So it doesn't have to always be work related. It can definitely be very personal and everything. So that gate 34 person, again, is going to hyperdrive the speed of that gate 15 person. And that gate 15 person is going to bring the big goals, essentially, for that gate 34 person. And so when they're missing, that gate 15 person is going to feel like they still have these really big goals, but now it's taking so much longer to get there. That's not a bad thing. That's just a level of perception. When we move down to gate 2 is about money. So we're getting into managing wealth specifically for world contributions or just bigger contributions, things that are bigger than yourself. And with this gate 2, this is also, I want to point out, not about creating money. So it's like the money already exists and you're figuring out how to allocate it in order to make the best for the overall community. It's seeking the gate 14 energy down in the sacral, which is about generating resources for the greater good. So here we are creating the resources. And I do want to point out that this does not always mean financial. It could also be like social connections. It could also be resources in terms of time. So maybe, for example, you're doing a cleanup opportunity for the environment and you need people to go and pick up trash for recycling, right? That's something that a gate 14 person would still be really good at doing because that's a resource that's coming together. So the gate 2 person, when they're seeking that gate 14 person, they're like, well, okay, I'm really good at managing money, but how do I get it? where does it come from? So when they connect with this gate 14 person, it's oftentimes a source of resources for that gate 2 person to manage. So there can be a sense of lack if that gate 14 person is missing, because maybe the money is not there. Maybe the wealth isn't there to go in and actually let gate 2 use their full strength. So gate 14 can be a person who really can give gate 2 the things that they need to then better the world overall. And gate 14, on the other hand, is really good at getting things, but not necessarily good at using things. So when they're working together, they have a nice symbiotic relationship of generating resources and managing them appropriately. But when either side is missing, there can be a mismanagement of resources or a lack of the resources altogether. Moving into our gate 46. So this is also connected to our sacral center. Gate 46 expresses themselves through their body. This is very much a soul-body connection. This is a very physical person. This could be usually somebody who dances or just theater, right? These very movement-based activities are people who have this gate 46 activated. And again, if you have this activated, but that doesn't resonate with you, ask yourself why. Do you feel uncomfortable dancing? Do you feel uncomfortable showing your body off? Why are those things happening? And as you start to look at those different energies, really what you want to be taking into account is, okay, well, why does this not show up this way for me? In which case, that's a sense of deconditioning. And with the 46 being expressed, when it is coming out well, you are fully embodying yourself through that movement. And it's seeking gate 29 in the sacral for commitment to do things, some sort of action. There's a lot of perseverance and determination in this gate 29. And so when we look at this, we might say, okay, well, maybe somebody who has this love of body loves to dance, but they're not necessarily committed to attending their recitals, or not necessarily committed to being part of a show. Well, when they're with that gate 29 person, now suddenly that becomes something that they do. And so they might commit to something. Like they might say, okay, yeah, I really do want to be in that show in 6 weeks. And so I'm going to go to all my recitals and practice for it. And then the gate 29 person goes away and they're like, I really don't want to go to my recital tonight. Like, I just want to move my body. Like, I don't really want to do that. So noticing that having that external energy and activity can also change how you're responding to the decisions that you're making in your environment. I do quite a bit of work with the authority, which is the decision-making areas of human design, to help people know that they're making decisions that are right for them at every point in time. And the last one that we have here is our gate 25, which is our love of spirit. So these are the people who just are basically love themselves. They are the natural healers. They really just radiate the need for caring and loving about people. And a point with this is that when this person is fully in their spirit, they love so much that they sometimes don't realize that other people aren't ready for their love, and their love can seem a little bit too forceful. So just a recognition of that one, to like love and be available, but don't always force yourself. Like, make sure that the other person is ready for your love as well. And gate 25 is seeking to the will center, which is also known as the heart or the ego. The will center is a motivational, it's a doing activity. And so gate 51 is about really making change happen, and it's change through shock. So the people with this gate 51 are going to give and receive really shocking events and activities that are going to cause change of some sort. So initially, when we look at this relationship between the 25 and the 51, it might seem kind of like an odd disconnect of things. But what this says is, if I have this gate 25, which is again from my identity center, so who I am is a healer, who I am is love. I want to bring that love to the world. I want to bring it to other people. And so I might be seeking these shocking events to be able to make that happen, to be able to make people understand and recognize why they need to be healed or how to be healed. And so that gate 51 person can oftentimes be a conduit for that gate 25 to really help spur the change that gate 25 wants to make, but didn't really know how to get there. When that goes away, then that gate 25 person can just continue to be like in a state of love and embodiment, which is beautiful, but it doesn't necessarily take it into any form of change for others. So we've now gone through all of the different gates in the identity center. When you came into this session, you were really struggling with identities that were constantly changing. You were questioning, why am I not the same all the time? Like, why do I feel like one person some days and somebody else on other days? I'm doubting myself. And you really just wanted to know, like, who am I? Why am I worthy? I just want to be able to step into this power. And as we've gone through these sessions, we've looked at how those open centers, the open identity center specifically, as well as the open gates, can create a sense of something missing. So now you know why those missing things feel like they're missing. And because in your picture, you visually have a way to show, oh, it's white. That's why it feels like it's missing. You can now understand the cause for that, and therefore start to let that go and recognize that, hey, I really don't need those things in my life. I already have my own strengths that are existing, and I can lean more into those. But now I know why those missing things tend to trigger me a little bit more. And I'm able to now structurally go through and relieve those triggers by recognizing where my strengths are, by identifying what those triggers are, and starting to see, okay, well, how do they show up in my life? Like, what happens when that change occurs? Like, when this person comes into my life, what energy do I feel? And when that person leaves my life, what energy seems to be lost? Okay, that's why that's happening. And suddenly you're able to heal from it. You're able to move on and be much more confident and comfortable in who you are as a person with your strengths. So I thank you so much for attending today's session about really identifying yourself. figuring out those missing gaps using the human design system. Again, my name is Missy. I'm your friendly human design coach, and I encourage you to reach out to me either on Instagram at I'm a Missy, IM.A.Missy, or on Facebook at Missy.Wanstall.1. Again, Wanstall is WANSTALL. I wish you the best in finding your own personal journeys through human design and really leaning into what those strengths are. If you'd like additional help understanding exactly how your strengths show up, talking through what disconnects you might have to other energies, or looking at any of your other energy centers as well, such as your will or such as your sacral, which we mentioned today, those are all things that I work through with my clients. So I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you so much for attending.